Chapter 14. Madame Schoss, who had been out to visit her daughter, increased the Countess' fears still more by telling what she had seen at a spirit dealer's in Myasnitsky Street. When returning by that street she had been unable to pass because of a drunken crowd rioting in front of the shop. She had taken a cab and driven home by a side street, and the cabman had told her that the people were breaking open the barrels at the drink store, having received orders to do so. After dinner the whole Rostov household set to work with enthusiastic haste, packing their belongings and preparing for their departure. The old count, suddenly setting to work, kept passing from the yard to the house and back again, shouting confused instructions to the hurrying people, and flurrying them still more. Petya directed things in the yard. Sonia, owing to the count's contradictory orders, lost her head and did not know what to do. The servants ran noisily about the house and yard, shouting and disputing. Natasha, with the ardor characteristic of all she did, suddenly set to work too. At first her intervention in the business of packing was received skeptically. Everybody expected some prank from her and did not wish to obey her, but she resolutely and passionately demanded obedience, grew angry and nearly cried because they did not heed her, and at last succeeded in making them believe her. Her first exploit, which cost her immense effort and established her authority, was the packing of the carpets. The Count had valuable Gobelin tapestries and Persian carpets in the house. When Natasha set to work, 2 cases were standing open in the ballroom, one almost full up with crockery, the other with carpets. There was also much china standing on the tables, and still more was being brought in from the storeroom. A 3rd case was needed and servants had gone to fetch it. "Sonia, wait a bit, we'll pack everything into these," said Natasha. "You can't, miss, we have tried to," said the butler's assistant. "No, wait a minute, please." And Natasha began rapidly taking out of the case dishes and plates wrapped in paper. "The dishes must go in here among the carpets," said she. "Why, it's a mercy if we can get the carpets alone into 3 cases, said the butler's assistant. "Oh, wait, please." And Natasha began rapidly and deftly sorting out the things. "These aren't needed," said she, putting aside some plates of Kiev ware. "These, yes, these must go among the carpets," she said, referring to the Saxony china dishes. "Don't, Natasha. Leave it alone. We'll get it all packed," urged Sonia reproachfully. "What a young lady she is," remarked the majordomo. But Natasha would not give in. She turned everything out and began quickly repacking, deciding that the inferior Russian carpets and unnecessary crockery should not be taken at all. When everything had been taken out of the cases, they recommenced packing, and it turned out that when the cheaper things not worth taking had nearly all been rejected, the valuable ones really did all go into the 2 cases. Only the lid of the case containing the carpets would not shut down. A few more things might have been taken out, but Natasha insisted on having her own way. She packed, repacked, pressed, made the butler's assistant and Petya, whom she had drawn into the business of packing, press on the lid, and made desperate efforts herself. "That's enough, Natasha," said Sonia. "I see you were right, but just take out the top one." "I won't," cried Natasha, with one hand holding back the hair that hung over her perspiring face, while with the other she pressed down the carpets. "Now press, Petya. Press, Vasilik, press hard," she cried. The carpets yielded and the lid closed. Natasha, clapping her hands, screamed with delight and tears fell from her eyes. But this only lasted a moment. She at once set to work afresh and they now trusted her completely. The Count was not angry even when they told him that Natasha had countermanded an order of his, and the servants now came to her to ask whether a cart was sufficiently loaded, and whether it might be corded up. Thanks to Natasha's directions the work now went on expeditiously, unnecessary things were left, and the most valuable packed as compactly as possible. But hard as they all worked till quite late that night, they could not get everything packed. The Countess had fallen asleep and the Count, having put off their departure till next morning, went to bed. Sonia and Natasha slept in the sitting room without undressing. That night another wounded man was driven down the Povarskia, and Mavra Kuzminikna, who was standing at the gate, had him brought into the Rostovs' yard. Mavra Kuzminikna concluded that he was a very important man. He was being conveyed in a caleche with a raised hood, and was quite covered by an apron. On the box beside the driver sat a venerable old attendant. A doctor and 2 soldiers followed the carriage in a cart. "Please come in here. The masters are going away and the whole house will be empty," said the old woman to the old attendant. "Well, perhaps," said he with a sigh. "We don't expect to get him home alive. We have a house of our own in Moscow, but it's a long way from here, and there's nobody living in it. Do us the honor to come in, there's plenty of everything in the master's house." "Come in," said Mavra Kuzminikna. "Is he very ill?" she asked. The attendant made a hopeless gesture. "We don't expect to get him home. We must ask the doctor." And the old servant got down from the box and went up to the cart. "All right," said the doctor. The old servant returned to the caleche, looked into it, shook his head disconsolately, told the driver to turn into the yard, and stopped beside Mavra Kuzminikna. "Oh, Lord Jesus Christ," she murmured. She invited them to take the wounded man into the house. "The masters won't object," she said. But they had to avoid carrying the man upstairs, and so they took him into the wing and put him in the room that had been Madame Schoss. This wounded man was Prince Andrew Bolkonsky. Chapter 15. Moscow's last day had come. It was a clear bright autumn day, a Sunday. The church bells everywhere were ringing for service, just as usual on Sundays. Nobody seemed yet to realize what awaited the city. Only 2 things indicated the social condition of Moscow: the rabble, that is the poor people, and the price of commodities. An enormous crowd of factory hands, house serfs, and peasants, with whom some officials, seminarists, and gentry were mingled, had gone early that morning to the 3 Hills. Having waited there for Rostophin who did not turn up, they became convinced that Moscow would be surrendered, and then dispersed all about the town to the public houses and cookshops. Prices too that day indicated the state of affairs. The price of weapons, of gold, of carts and horses, kept rising, but the value of paper money and city articles kept falling, so that by midday there were instances of carters removing valuable goods, such as cloth, and receiving in payment a half of what they carted, while peasant horses were fetching 500 rubles each, and furniture, mirrors, and bronzes were being given away for nothing. In the Rostov state old-fashioned house the dissolution of former conditions of life was but little noticeable. As to the serfs the only indication was that 3 out of their huge retinue disappeared during the night, but nothing was stolen, and as to the value of their possessions, the 30 peasant carts that had come in from their estates and which many people envied proved to be extremely valuable and they were offered enormous sums of money for them. Not only were huge sums offered for the horses and carts, but on the previous evening and early in the morning of the 1st of September, orderlies and servants sent by wounded officers came to the Rostovs and wounded men dragged themselves there from the Rostovs and from neighboring houses where they were accommodated, entreating the servants to try to get them a lift out of Moscow. The major domo to whom these entreaties were addressed, though he was sorry for the wounded, resolutely refused, saying that he dare not even mention the matter to the count. Pity these wounded men as one might, it was evident that if they were given 1 cart there would be no reason to refuse another, or all the carts and one's own carriages as well. 30 carts could not save all the wounded and in the general catastrophe one could not disregard oneself and one's own family. So thought the majordomo on his master's behalf. On waking up that morning Count Ilya Rostov left his bedroom softly, so as not to wake the countess who had fallen asleep only toward morning, and came out to the porch in his lilac silk dressing gown. In the yard stood the carts ready corded. The carriages were at the front porch. The majordomo stood at the porch talking to an elderly orderly and to a pale young officer with a bandaged arm. On seeing the count the majordomo made a significant and stern gesture to them both to go away. "Well, Vasilik, is everything ready?" asked the count, and stroking his bald head he looked good-naturedly at the officer and the orderly and nodded to them. He liked to see new faces. "We can harness at once, Your Excellency." "Well, that's right. As soon as the countess wakes we'll be off, God willing. What is it, gentlemen?" he added, turning to the officer. "Are you staying in my house?" The officer came nearer and suddenly his face flushed crimson. "Count, be so good as to allow me, for God's sake, to get into some corner of one of your carts. I have nothing here with me. I shall be all right on a loaded cart." Before the officer had finished speaking, the orderly made the same request on behalf of his master. "Oh, yes, yes, yes," said the Count hastily. "I shall be very pleased, very pleased. Vasilik, you'll see to it. Just unload 1 or 2 carts." "Well, what of it, do what's necessary," said the Count, muttering some indefinite order. But at the same moment an expression of warm gratitude on the officer's face had already sealed the order. The Count looked around him. In the yard, at the gates, at the window of the wings, wounded officers and their orderlies were to be seen. They were all looking at the Count and moving toward the porch. "Please step into the gallery, Your Excellency," said the majordomo. "What are your orders about the pictures?" The Count went into the house with him, repeating his order not to refuse the wounded who asked for a lift. "Well, never mind, some of the things can be unloaded," he added in a soft, confidential voice, as though afraid of being overheard. At 9 o'clock the Countess woke up, and Matrina Timofeevna, who had been her lady's maid before her marriage and now performed a sort of chief gendarme's duty for her, came to say that Madame Schoss was much offended and the young lady's summer dresses could not be left behind. On inquiry, the Countess learned that Madame Schoss was offended because her trunk had been taken down from its cart, and all the loads were being uncorded and the luggage taken out of the carts to make room for wounded men whom the Count in the simplicity of his heart had ordered that they should take with them. The Countess sent for her husband. "What is this, my dear? I hear that the luggage is being unloaded. You know, love, I wanted to tell you. Countess dear, an officer came to me to ask for a few carts for the wounded. After all, ours are things that can be bought, but think what being left behind means to them. Really now, in our own yard, we ask them in ourselves and there are officers among them. You know, I think, my dear, let them be taken, where's the hurry?" The Count spoke timidly, as he always did when talking of money matters. The Countess was accustomed to this tone as a precursor of news of something detrimental to the children's interests, such as the building of a new gallery or conservatory, the inauguration of a private theatre or an orchestra. She was accustomed always to oppose anything announced in that timid tone and considered it her duty to do so. She assumed her dolefully submissive manner and said to her husband, "Listen to me, Count, you have managed matters so that we are getting nothing for the house, and now you wish to throw away all the children's property. You said yourself that we have 100,000 rubles worth of things in the house. I don't consent, my dear, I don't. Do as you please. It's the government's business to look after the wounded, they know that. Look at the Lopukins opposite, they cleared out everything 2 days ago. That's what other people do. It's only we who are such fools. If you have no pity on me, have some for the children." Flourishing his arms in despair, the Count left the room without replying. "Papa, what are you doing that for?" asked Natasha, who had followed him into her mother's room. "Nothing." "What business is it of yours?" muttered the Count angrily. "But I heard," said Natasha. "Why does Mama object?" "What business is it of yours?" cried the Count. Natasha stepped up to the window and pondered. "Papa. Here's Berg coming to see us," said she, looking out of the window. Chapter 16. Berg, the Rostov's son-in-law, was already a colonel wearing the orders of Vladimir and Anna, and he still filled the quiet and agreeable post of assistant to the head of the staff of the assistant commander of the 1st Division of the 2nd Army. On the 1st of September he had come to Moscow from the army. He had nothing to do in Moscow, but he had noticed that everyone in the army was asking for leave to visit Moscow and had something to do there. So he considered it necessary to ask for leave of absence for family and domestic reasons. Berg drove up to his father-in-law's house in his spruce little trap with a pair of sleek roans, exactly like those of a certain prince. He looked attentively at the carts in the yard and while going up to the porch took out a clean pocket handkerchief and tied a knot in it. From the anteroom Berg ran with smooth though impatient steps into the drawing-room, where he embraced the Count, kissed the hands of Natasha and Sonia, and hastened to inquire after Mama's health. "Health, at a time like this?" said the Count. "Come, tell us the news. Is the army retreating or will there be another battle?" "God Almighty alone can decide the fate of our fatherland, Papa," said Berg. "The army is burning with a spirit of heroism and the leaders, so to say, have now assembled in council. No one knows what is coming. But in general I can tell you, Papa, that such a heroic spirit, the truly antique valor of the Russian army, which it, he corrected himself, has shown or displayed in the battle of the 26th, there are no words worthy to do it justice. I tell you, Papa, he smote himself on the breast as a general he had heard speaking had done, but Berg did it a trifle late, for he should have struck his breast at the words, Russian army. I tell you frankly that we, the commanders, far from having to urge the men on or anything of that kind, could hardly restrain those exploits of antique valor," he went on rapidly. "General Barclay de Tolly risked his life everywhere at the head of the troops, I can assure you. Our corps was stationed on a hillside. You can imagine." And Berg related all that he remembered of the various tales he had heard those days. Natasha watched him with an intent gaze that confused him, as if she were trying to find in his face the answer to some question. "Altogether such heroism as was displayed by the Russian warriors cannot be imagined or adequately praised," said Berg, glancing round at Natasha, and as if anxious to conciliate her, replying to her intent look with a smile. "Russia is not in Moscow, she lives in the hearts of her sons." "Isn't it so, Papa?" said he. Just then the Countess came in from the sitting room with a weary and dissatisfied expression. Berg hurriedly jumped up, kissed her hand, asked about her health, and, swaying his head from side to side to express sympathy, remained standing beside her. "Yes, Mama, I tell you sincerely that these are hard and sad times for every Russian. But why are you so anxious? You have still time to get away." "I can't think what the servants are about," said the Countess, turning to her husband. "I have just been told that nothing is ready yet. Somebody after all must see to things. One misses Mitenka at such times. There won't be any end to it." The Count was about to say something, but evidently restrained himself. He got up from his chair and went to the door. At that moment Berg drew out his handkerchief as if to blow his nose and, seeing the knot in it, pondered, shaking his head sadly and significantly. "And I have a great favor to ask of you, Papa," said he. "Ahem," said the Count, and stopped. "I was driving past Yusupov's house just now," said Berg with a laugh, "when the steward, a man I know, ran out and asked me whether I wouldn't buy something. I went in out of curiosity, you know, and there is a small chiffonier and a dressing table. You know how dear Vera wanted a chiffonier like that and how we had a dispute about it." At the mention of the chiffonier and dressing table Berg involuntarily changed his tone to one of pleasure at his admirable domestic arrangements. "And it's such a beauty. It pulls out and has a secret English drawer, you know. And dear Vera has long wanted one. I wish to give her a surprise, you see. I saw so many of those peasant carts in your yard. Please let me have one, I will pay the man well, and—" The Count frowned and coughed. "Ask the Countess, I don't give orders." "If it's inconvenient, please don't," said Berg. "Only I so wanted it, for dear Vera's sake." "Oh, go to the devil, all of you." "To the devil, the devil, the devil," cried the old Count. "My head's in a whirl." And he left the room. The Countess began to cry. "Yes, Mama. Yes, these are very hard times," said Berg. Natasha left the room with her father and, as if finding it difficult to reach some decision, first followed him and then ran downstairs. Petya was in the porch, engaged in giving out weapons to the servants who were to leave Moscow. The loaded carts were still standing in the yard. 2 of them had been uncorded and a wounded officer was climbing into one of them helped by an orderly. "Do you know what it's about?" Petya asked Natasha. She understood that he meant what were their parents quarreling about. She did not answer. It's because Papa wanted to give up all the carts to the wounded, said Petya. Vasilik told me. I consider, Natasha suddenly almost shouted, turning her angry face to Petya, I consider it so horrid, so abominable, so. I don't know what. Are we despicable Germans? Her throat quivered with convulsive sobs and, afraid of weakening and letting the force of her anger run to waste, she turned and rushed headlong up the stairs. Berg was sitting beside the Countess consoling her with the respectful attention of a relative. The Count, pipe in hand, was pacing up and down the room, when Natasha, her face distorted by anger, burst in like a tempest and approached her mother with rapid steps. It's horrid. It's abominable, she screamed. You can't possibly have ordered it. Berg and the Countess looked at her, perplexed and frightened. The Count stood still at the window and listened. Mama, it's impossible, see what is going on in the yard, she cried. They will be left. What's the matter with you? Who are they? What do you want? Why, the wounded. It's impossible, Mama. It's monstrous. No, Mama darling, it's not the thing. Please forgive me, darling. Mama, what does it matter what we take away? Only look what is going on in the yard. Mama. It's impossible. The Count stood by the window and listened without turning round. Suddenly he sniffed and put his face closer to the window. The Countess glanced at her daughter, saw her face full of shame for her mother, saw her agitation, and understood why her husband did not turn to look at her now, and she glanced round quite disconcerted. Oh, do as you like. Am I hindering anyone? She said, not surrendering at once. Mama, darling, forgive me. But the Countess pushed her daughter away and went up to her husband. My dear, you order what is right. You know I don't understand about it, said she, dropping her eyes shamefacedly. The eggs are teaching the hen, muttered the Count through tears of joy, and he embraced his wife who was glad to hide her look of shame on his breast. Papa. Mama. May I see to it? May I? Asked Natasha. We will still take all the most necessary things. The Count nodded affirmatively, and Natasha, at the rapid pace at which she used to run when playing at tag, ran through the ballroom to the anteroom and downstairs into the yard. The servants gathered round Natasha, but could not believe the strange order she brought them until the Count himself, in his wife's name, confirmed the order to give up all the carts to the wounded and take the trunks to the storerooms. When they understood that order the servants set to work at this new task with pleasure and zeal. It no longer seemed strange to them but on the contrary it seemed the only thing that could be done, just as a quarter of an hour before it had not seemed strange to anyone that the wounded should be left behind and the goods carted away but that had seemed the only thing to do. The whole household, as if to atone for not having done it sooner, set eagerly to work at the new task of placing the wounded in the carts. The wounded dragged themselves out of their rooms and stood with pale but happy faces round the carts. The news that carts were to be had spread to the neighboring houses, from which wounded men began to come into the Rostovs' yard. Many of the wounded asked them not to unload the carts but only to let them sit on the top of the things. But the work of unloading, once started, could not be arrested. It seemed not to matter whether all or only half the things were left behind. Cases full of china, bronzes, pictures, and mirrors that had been so carefully packed the night before now lay about the yard, and still they went on searching for and finding possibilities of unloading this or that and letting the wounded have another and yet another cart. We can take 4 more men, said the steward. They can have my trap, or else what is to become of them? Let them have my wardrobe cart, said the Countess. Dunyasha can go with me in the carriage. They unloaded the wardrobe cart and sent it to take wounded men from a house 2 doors off. The whole household, servants included, was bright and animated. Natasha was in a state of rapturous excitement such as she had not known for a long time. What could we fasten this onto? Asked the servants, trying to fix a trunk on the narrow footboard behind the carriage. We must keep at least 1 cart. What's in it? Asked Natasha. The Count's books. Leave it, Vasilik will put it away. It's not wanted. The phaeton was full of people and there was a doubt as to where Count Peter could sit. On the box. You'll sit on the box, won't you, Petya? Cried Natasha. Sonia too was busy all this time, but the aim of her efforts was quite different from Natasha's. She was putting away the things that had to be left behind and making a list of them as the Countess wished, and she tried to get as much taken away with them as possible.